36.
35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30.
29.
28.
27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22.
21.
20. 19.
18.
17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10.
9. 8.
7.
6.
5.
4.
3.
2.
1.
Hey, Rocky, you want to see me pull a show out of my hat? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mouthwash. And you have Lisa Schmitz tonight instead of John Schmitz. And tonight's show is all about relationships. It's the eve of Valentine's Day. So we have a action-packed show, all women tonight. You get us tonight. So I hope you stick with us. It's going to be a great show. I want to give a little foreshadowing here. So in my little intro ad that we did for the show earlier this week, I said, I have a little bit of PTSD when it comes to Valentine's Day. Now you're going to say, okay, what? You've got on a shirt that says, I feel great. I have on a little red heart. But back in the day, I have a couple of stories related to Valentine's Day, and I'll save it for the show, but I'll give you one of them. One of my divorces, we announced to all of our friends on Valentine's Day that we were getting divorced. And so that's one of the reasons that for me, it's just not a great holiday. We don't celebrate it around here, but we're going to talk about relationships and how a lot of us feel about Valentine's Day, a lot of singles, a lot of marrieds, and we have some really great guests. So producer Johnny, I'm going to let you bring them on. So we have April Bordeaux, who is with Care to Change. She is a therapist, counselor, expert in relationship things. And then we have Lucy Brenton, who's a regular on the show. Tiffany is going to come to us via video, and Dana Black, who's one of the best friends of our show. So producer Johnny, bring on the crew. And I hope we're not having technical
Hey, Patriots. Well, I've got a great event for you. The RWFF is bringing you General Flynn. Forgiato Blow, Latinos for Trump will be performing. The event is free. And of course, you can upgrade to a VIP pass. Rhonda Miller, Micah Beckwith, Curtis Hill, Mama Bear with Election Integrity, Craig Haggard, Indiana's House Representative. Monday, February 19th, 395 Parquet Conference Center, Shepherdsville, Kentucky. We hope to see you there. Thank you.
And of course, Lisa, the guest host, forgets that we have an ad on the show tonight. So I apologize for that. I've had some technical difficulties. Hi, April. How are you? So glad you're on tonight. How are you doing the night before Valentine's Day?
I'm doing great. It's been a great day.
Good. Have you guys been busy this last week just with people needing to talk about how they feel about this holiday? Is this a busy time for you? And I say that in all sincerity.
Right. I don't know that it's any busier than it normally is. I think people that have relationship woes have it all year long. This is just a day to spotlight the woe if you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, I do want to share one of my stories real fast, and you're going to laugh at me because I don't even know if you've heard this story. And April and I have known each other for 20 years. So I probably would be surprised if you hadn't heard this story. But in my previous marriage, I had this thing about I don't want flowers or I do want flowers. I love flowers. They're a special touch, for any kind of holiday. But I also do flowers, right? So I'm a little particular about it. And so in the middle of a separation, he sends me flowers, and it's a dozen roses, 11 red, 1 pink. And in my heart of hearts, because I'm still wanting to work things out, I'm like, it's got to mean something. Like, that's got to mean something. So I get that like anxiety about me, like trying to figure it out. Like, what does it mean? Going through all the ruminations, right? And I said to my assistant, I'm like, what is it? It's got to mean something. What do you think it means? And she's like, just call the florist. So I called the florist and he says to me, oh, honey, I just thought the 1 pink one looked cool. So I stuck it. And so then I like marched to the break room after calling the then husband and saying, thank you for the flowers. And he says, well, I figured I had to. So I went and just like threw them in the trash and made it like a big dramatic moment. So, so give me your expert opinion on that.
Well, it sounds like two things. One, it's a little disappointing for you. You were hoping for a connection and maybe showing a little affection through the gift giving. So that's disappointing. And two, obviously there wasn't a lot of thought, and probably it sounds like he was doing it out of meeting some expectation or alleviating some form of guilt. And so the intent behind the gift wasn't with the intent of having connection.
Yes. Okay. So I will speak to that. So now Johnny and I are dating, and he has heard this story, and he drops by my office one day and drops off a Kroger bag and says, I just want to leave this for Lisa. And I go to pick up this bag, and it's 3 small mini bags of flour that you would use to make cookies with. And in it said, I thought you would enjoy these, FLOURS.
Wow.
And, and it was hilarious, because he knew how I felt about that. He wanted to make me laugh. And to me, that meant way more than fresh flowers and water ever would. So you obviously knew that we were talking about relationships tonight. You are an expert in this field. What can you tell those of us that maybe in healthy relationships, how to help our friends who are not in healthy relationships? Or, I'm a fan of counseling. I saw my counselor on Monday. I feel like everybody needs like a checkup every now and then just to make sure we're mentally healthy. So give us your advice on that.
Well, thank you for saying expert, but let me just clarify that for a second, because the whole having human relationships is a lifelong journey. And so I might get some things right, and I definitely get some things wrong. So I like to consider myself more of a fellow journeyer, and have learned things along the way, mostly by doing things wrong. But also have studied this whole phenom of relationships and marriages, and have found what research indicates makes a difference. So I think I don't know that I would consider myself an expert as much as a fellow journeyer with anyone who desires to be in some form of relationship. So I want to just start by saying that, so that because I don't have all the answers. You can ask my kids, you can ask my husband. They'll tell you, they'll be the first ones to say, yeah, she doesn't have it all together. So just want to throw that out there right at the beginning. But I'm not sure, when you say the question, tell us what we need to know, is that in reference to something specific? Because that's kind of like a big question.
Well, let me stop right there. Say, I'm going to go ahead and bring on the panel, because they have some insight into this as well. So, but I'll tell you my thought here. For those people that are watching that might not have experienced having a counselor, having a therapist, dealing with relational issues, kind of, what your best advice would be to those people who might not have experienced that before. So I'm going to say, producer Johnny, and before we bring the panel on, we are going to do TIFF talk first. So hold on to that thought for a second.
Okay.
Everybody, it's time for TIFF Talk. Dana, Lucy, and Lisa, I'm so very sad that I could not be with you guys today. I'm actually flying home. I'm on a compound someplace with Bigfoot. Imagine that. But I wanted to talk about dating in 2024 as an independent woman. So I started dating in the 80s, and oh my gosh, is this my 4th decade of dating? It could be. So my experience is when I think about things that have changed, as an independent woman, I come into this, I'm not looking for a husband. I take that back. I'm not looking for a man to father my children. I'm, partially retired, so I'm not looking necessarily to build that kind of life with somebody. So a lot more companionship. But on that hunt for companionship, these are the big things that have changed. Number one, standards. Standards are out the window. There's people who are polyamorous and swingers and, people who are doing very, very different things than we were doing years ago when dating was a lot simpler. So that's one of the things. And I think as you date and you're independent, you're either accepting and want to be involved in things like that or not. And it's okay. Either way, you have to be truthful to yourself. The other thing is controlled access. We all grew up in homes that probably had one telephone, where now people have your biometric data. How do we have so much information about people? You have to try to create some buffer between what people are able to consume about you and what you want to share, because certainly private things should be for private people. And the other thing that has changed, which is most unfortunate, is the level of truthfulness between people. We live in a society full of fear of missing out. And I think that controls a lot of what people want and do, in a world where, the woman who's in front of me right now, she's perfect and wonderful, but golly geez, around the corner might be perfect and wonderful and 1 inch taller. There's the lack of truthfulness. People just absolutely not being honest about what they want or who they are. And that's another big barrier. But at the end of the day, growing up in that house with one telephone, communication was key. I think we were in better relationships in the 80s and 90s because there was like one telephone and we understood where we were in each other's lives when communication was more streamlined and direct and purposeful. And people weren't afraid to be honest. So there you go. Tiffany, I'm flying in tonight. And as you all know, I run a catch and release program for Bigfoot. Unlike many other people, I've been able to find quite a few, though they say they're hidden. Imagine that. So miss you guys. See you soon. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh my goodness, we love Tiffany. So April, she just kind of like took over all the thunder from my previous question, which I love so much. So Dana, Lucy, welcome to you two.
What's happening?
Hey, everything. I'm gonna do like John. How you doing tonight? How you doing, Dana?
I'm good. It's been a long work day, but I love what I do, so it's not really work.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. And Lucy, you got all the Valentine's bling going on.
I did. I went out and I found a nice little background there. I'm excited. I'm a crazy chicken lady. So if you can find, a significant other that'll put up with your chickens, I mean, you probably have to keep them.
So April, I do want to go back just real quick because we are talking about relationships, probably mainly dating. It is Valentine's Day. But in our relationship lives, what would you say we could all do just as people who may have gone to counseling or not could do to kind of approach this kind of thing from a healthy place?
Yeah, the first step in a healthy relationship, no matter the kind of relationship it is starting with yourself. It's showing up, knowing yourself, your story, what's important to your story, and bringing the best version of yourself to the relationship. Relationships have a much better chance at being fulfilling and successful when the people in the relationship show up best version of the self. I'm not saying perfect version of self. I'm saying best version. And so when it comes to counseling, body, mind, and spirit, right? We're not just what we're thinking. we're what we're feeling, we're what we believe, what our values are. And so the more that we can know ourselves and be healthy in mind, body, and spirit, the better chance we have at entering into a relationship. So my first step in this would be to take the time to discover who you are and to become the best version of yourself, whatever that version is. And we're all work in progress, and showing up in that way. And so that's where counseling can be super helpful for someone that feels stuck or has been through difficult times, or have a challenge, don't understand something about themselves. Why do I keep finding this kind of person, et cetera, et cetera? That's when counseling can really help with those kind of things. So my first piece of advice would be find out who you are and show up best version of yourself. Do yourself a favor to do your own work before jumping into any sort of relationship. So that'd be my first piece of advice that I would give.
That's great. Dana and Lucy, I'm going to pitch it to you guys. What questions do you have? Dana, you want to go first?
I actually don't have any questions because I'm one of those settled old ladies. You kind of have to take me as I am or leave me alone. But I'm lucky enough that like you said, you find somebody that can put up with your mess. And my partner Nicole she understands me. She understands what I need and what I don't need, and she allows me to understand what she needs and what she doesn't need. And so we're in a really positive place. I don't have any questions because I think what you said though, April, about knowing who you are, I think that's why at an advanced age, I'm better at relationships than I was at a younger age. And for those who found love young, I applaud you. I was too fickle and had a short attention span. So they weren't going to stick around long. So
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you're right though. The older I get, the more my expectations have changed. In fact, my expectations aren't nearly as divisive as they were before, because they had to look a certain way, they had to dress a certain way, they had to smell a certain way, they had to have so many credentials, they had to have none of those things matter. Now it's how do you treat yourself, how do you treat your kids, and then if you treat those people well, then I'm probably going to be treated all right. And then you have to allow me to do the same thing for you. So I actually don't have any questions. I just agree with you.
Nice.
Dana, took you a long time to get there, though. John and I joke and say we've been married 62 years and just not to each other. We figured out all the wrong things to do.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. I mean, everybody say women know women. Please. Apparently, I don't know women that well because I wasn't picking the right mates for me. They were women and they were beautiful women, but they weren't the right mates. And sometimes I would accept things that I shouldn't have accepted, and I made them accept things that they shouldn't have to accept. And so you learn that, you know what, I need somebody that understands what my passion is and allows me to support them, because I think it's a two-way thing, and that it's cool to have somebody that's your cheerleader, but will they allow you to cheerlead for them? And it took me a long time to get there. It took me saying, I don't ever want to be in a relationship ever again to meet somebody and know what your boundaries are. Like, I don't have to live with my partner. We call ourselves socially married. We wear rings, but we live in two different cities and we like it.
Yeah. Lucy, how about you?
I think that's awesome. So, April, I know you don't know me, so I'll just give you my quick thing.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I gotcha. I hit the wrong button. So I have 10 children. I've been married to my college sweetheart since 1991. So the things that he's saying something in the background. We have 3 grandchildren. So the questions I'm looking for are, how do I model a great relationship that will, I don't want to say lead my children, but give them something that they can feel solid in, that gives them a good example of, how some, how do I act to make sure that my daughters understand that they don't need to compromise for somebody who's not going to treat them the absolute best? What kind of behaviors do I need to exhibit? What kind of behaviors does my husband need to exhibit? And that communication that creates the legacy. So what kind of advice would you give me?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I can assure you and any parent, whether you realize it or not, you're modeling in the good, the bad, and the ugly, no matter what we are doing. And here's how I know, because how many people go to school to learn how to be a wife? or how many people go to school to learn how to be a husband? And so where do we learn how to be a partner? Where do we learn how to be a spouse? We learn it from the people who showed us growing up, whether it's good or bad. And so we're given these tools in how to communicate, how to resolve conflict. And we can say, I swear I will never fill in the blank like my mom, or fill in the blank like my dad. And yet, those are the tools we were handed. So we can pretend we don't have them. And then we get into a relationship and life starts happening. And all of a sudden we're like, we say something and all of a sudden our mom comes out of our mouth, or our dad comes out of our mouth like, I swore I'd never do it. Where did it come from? Because we're used to these tools that we were handed, and we weren't handed husband 101 tools or wife 101 tools or partner one. And so we are modeling whether we realize it or not, just like our parents or our caretakers, whoever it was that raised us, modeled for us how to communicate, how to get our needs met, how to resolve conflict. And so, first of all, the fact that you're asking the question says, I'm aware. I've got all these little people watching me, and we all know no one's perfect. We're all on this journey. And so what can I do to give them the best tools so that when they get into a relationship, they're picking up tools that actually work versus the tools we might have been handed growing up, right? That's the reality. And a lot of times learning new skills at communication and relationships and boundaries and conflict resolution, it feels foreign. We pick up a new tool and we say, this is heavy, this is hard, this doesn't work. Well, that's not the tool you learned life with. And so it will feel. And so to your point, Lisa, too, like when we go to counseling and the counselor's giving a new tool, if like, this is hard work, this is hard to do this stuff. Yeah, because it's not familiar. It's like going to the gym and picking up a different weight or trying a different exercise. Like, ooh, that muscle hurts because you're not used to using it. So for one, I would say for those that are watching or listening, whatever it is, number one, be aware that you are handing over tools, whether you realize it or not. So that's key. The second thing I would say is kind of to go along with that same idea of taking care of yourself first and bringing best version of self. The second one is a concept. I didn't make up the concept, but I love the concept and use it all the time, is know what is your yard and what is not your yard. And I heard Dana say something about boundaries. I have a yard, and my yard is how I think and how I feel and how I behave, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviors. They belong to me. And my husband, and we've been married 25 years, 26 years this year. He has his yard. That's his own thoughts, his own feelings, his own beliefs. And a good relationship isn't sameness. We don't have to have the same thoughts, but we get into this friction when, I believe, and all of a sudden, like, now what do we do? Because we don't believe the same thing. And sometimes, like you said, Dana, living in different cities, right? It's like, if that's what works for you, you literally have your own yard. But, in a relationships, like I have my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs and behaviors, and my husband does too. And then we have this shared space. And I have to know what belongs to me and what doesn't belong to me. And so when he steps into my yard and says, well, you probably should, I have to say, first of all, it's my yard. And if you want to, if I invite you in and I say, give me some feedback, okay, I'll listen. Ultimately, a lot of times we like to give our power away. You made me do this. Well, you made me feel, right? Now, what I can say is, if you have a neighbor and they have dandelions and they don't take care of their dandelions, their weeds can blow over and they can influence your yard, but it's still your yard. And that's the kind of sucky part. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the show or not, but it's the sucky part of relationships, because when our spouse or our partner hurts us intentionally, unintentionally, most of the time it's unintentionally. And if it's intentionally, get help right away. But if it's like unintentionally hurt us by what they say or do, the sucky part is we have to decide what we're going to do with it. Right? Like, my husband says or does something and I say, that hurts. I can throw it back. Now you got to come fix this. Well,
Mhm.
actually, I'm the one hurting, and that's my yard. And that is a hard concept because a lot of times I look in, especially as a therapist, I look in my husband's yard and I see his weeds, and I want to jump over there and help him clean himself up. Hey, let me help you with your issues that you got going on. I'm a therapist, right? And he's like, not your business. I'm like, yeah, but it's affecting my yard. Get out of my yard, right? And that's where we can find our wholeness. And that's where, when we're taking care of our own yard, then our weeds aren't growing. If I'm jumping in his yard, weeds are growing in mine, right? So I would say, number one, the awareness, but and number two would be really taking care of ourselves. And then three, really like owning what belongs to us and what doesn't. And when someone continually hurts and wounds, it's like the boundary is maybe we need to have a necessary ending, right? So knowing when it's enough, right? And so, and here's another piece which I didn't think of saying. I thought of it as you were asking the question, is because you asked the question about how to model. It is when we make mistakes, to not just own them, but to do a redo, because our brains sort of go on autopilot when we get in an argument and we get into these reactive cycles. And then, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry too. Well, we don't go back and say, let's redo this the right way, to teach our brains that we can, so that next time our brain can kind of go in the right direction. So I always say, when my husband and I argue in front of the kids, we need to apologize and do the redo in front of the kids, because we need to show them that sometimes conflict can bring connection on the other side if it's handled correctly and in a healthy way. And so if you argue in front of the kids, apologize and redo in front of the kids, so they can watch not just the arguing, but the reconciling, because there's something beautiful about reconciling and forgiveness that is a lost art in today's world of offense. We like to spend the time in the offense. We don't like to spend the time in the bridging, right? And in the reconciling. And if we spend as much time in reconciling and in forgiving and learning how to communicate, our culture would actually be different. So I would say, as parents, teaching our kids the art of reconciling, the art of redoing, the art of apologizing, the art of forgiveness, the art of boundaries. These are all things, gifts, that we can give to our kids. So I don't want to keep talking, and I could talk about this forever, but that's what comes to my mind first when you ask that question.
I think that's fantastic advice, not only for Lucy, who still has kids at home, but for those of us who have grandkids, and the way we handle the same type of situations and modeling that for the grandkids as well. So I think one of our viewers, Adam, has a question. I think that's going to go up on the screen. And for those of you on the panel, and April, know that I cannot read it on my phone. So I'm going to let April, if you wouldn't mind, can you read it? Okay. And then it's probably you.
Yeah. Dana, I think this might be for you because you made this comment. So I'm going to let you answer, but I'll read it since Lisa asked me to. Can you elaborate more on what you mean about find someone who will not only be your cheerleader, but will let you be their cheerleader?
Yeah. So I know that a lot of us feel like when we think about who we want as a partner, we want someone who's going to support us. And I need somebody to have my back, right? I need somebody to be there, that shoulder I need to cry on. But just like when you're asking someone to have your back, you're also making yourself vulnerable to them. You're relying on them to be there. You need someone who is also going to be vulnerable with you, right? To let you in enough for them to feel secure enough for you to have their back. So when I say cheerleader, not just in bad times, but obviously in good times, if I'm working on something and it's a Dana thing, Nick is like right there. But if Nick has something, I know how to take a back seat and let her shine and be her support. And how do you find that? Like she said, we do not need to be in lockstep, because that's not going to happen. April told us we can't be in lockstep. But what you can do is find the things that matter. Understand who your partner is. Understand who you're getting to know. I know where Nicole is better than me at things, so I allow you lead because you're better at that than I am, and she knows the things that I'm great at. Dana, you lead, and you understand those boundaries and those parameters. That way, you're helping each other grow, because the goal is to be better tomorrow than you are today. And if you're finding a way to be that and inspire that in your partner, and your partner's allowing you to do that too, because nobody knows everything, right? Nobody knows everything. You're giving each other space, grace. You're giving each other an opportunity to learn and be vulnerable. And then you're celebrating their joy too, right? Again, I didn't learn none of this until I was at the 40.
Same here, Dana. And I want to echo that, because John and I talk about all the time how we have flourished in so many different ways as a couple than we ever would have with the people we were with before or on our own. And I say all the time, he's the one who has encouraged my creativity and helped support that and enabled me to flourish in that, because he's such a cheerleader and supporter. So everything, Dana, that you just said.
Well, I will disagree with you on one thing, because April brought it up, and that was know who you are when you walk into a space. I believe that I would still be successful and still be able to accomplish the things if I were single, not necessarily with those other people, but if I were single, because nobody can make you whole. Right? Nobody can make you whole, but they can highlight things. You may learn something a little faster. So I think that I'm doing the things that I would have done whether I was with Nicole or not, but I enjoy them a whole lot better. And then how about I get to really enjoy what she's doing and see her world through her eyes, right? So I kind of see you on that, but I have to say I would still be Dana and be doing the things instead of buying dishwashers, though. Like, when Nicole needs a dishwasher, I got to go buy a dishwasher. There are things there. I wouldn't have those responsibilities, but I don't mind them. Right. So I feel that for you too. But I think for me and Nick was already successful when I met her. One of the things that attracted me to her was her success in her space, despite the challenges and obstacles she had in her life. Those were the things that drew me to her. And she was already drawn to me by the things that I had already accomplished. It's funny because she's an elected official and I'm a pundit. So we're in the same industry. We just attack it differently.
Yeah.
Right. So it's finding that April, you the expert. I'm just a chick that's had a few girlfriends.
I Lucy real quick though before, because obviously Dana and I've had a perspective. Lucy, you guys are high school sweethearts. You've been together for a long time, have a lot of kids. So how does what we've said fit into your experience? Because honestly, I would have loved to have had your experience. My parents have been married 60 plus years, and that's what I longed for as a child. That's not what my lot in life was. So give us your perspective.
Well, kids are the glue. But something that I learned really early in my marriage was to gatekeep the kinds of things that I allowed to have influence on me in my relationship. And specifically, my mother-in-law, she was a romance novel voracious reader, and I was a reader, and my husband's aunt loved romance novels. And so when I came into the family, like, "Ooh, you love to read. We have all of these books for you." And so for the first few months we were married, I was reading all of these books that had been given to me by my mother-in-law and my aunt, and they were so much fun to read. Those romance novels are so much fun. But then I looked around and I realized comparison is the thief of joy. I have this wonderful man that I've married, and all of a sudden I'm comparing him to all these fictional books that are just like literally fantasies in somebody else's head. And so I realized I had to stop reading them. And what that taught me as I got older is to gatekeep my own mind. And, a lot of us saying in church, be careful, little eyes, what you see. That's so true. That is so true. And also as a married woman, especially when I was young and cute and skinnier, I got hit on a lot. And, what do you do as a married person when, somebody's hitting on you? I mean, gosh, you feel alive and it feels complimentary and you're like that. But what you have to do is you have to say, stop. You don't get that access to me. No, you don't get to text me personally. And I'm glad, I'm glad that we work together and all that kind of stuff. But if you find somebody giving you that kind of unwanted attention, you just have to stop it in its tracks, and you have to put that barrier up early, because otherwise you could lose what you have if you're not vigilant.
If I may jump in on that, about the unwanted attention, because both her and I are both in very public spaces. You know, we're not by any stretch of the imagination swingers or anything like that. But if my thing has always been, and my partner's bisexual, so you know, I'm a whole lesbian, she's bisexual, so it's a whole nother dynamic, right? But she's attractive, and I know people are going to be attracted to her. And so one of the things I always say is just make sure you share. And what I mean is tell me when somebody is attracted to you, or tell me, you know, that way it's all good, because it may make you feel good that somebody gave you a compliment. Share that with me. Share that with me. And it's okay, because I'm not a jealous person. I date beautiful women. So guess what? If I think they're beautiful, other people are going to think they're beautiful. I think she's smart. Other people are going to think she's smart. So, but that's where you have to find that boundary. Like, she knows when I give a speech, somebody's going to come up and do it and feel some kind of way about it. And she goes, "Oh, you got the whole crowd." I said, or look at her, you know, and we talk about it. Yes, we have those boundaries. No, we're not going out on dates and texting people. You right. Don't be texting me. You ain't got that privilege. But we share, like, oh, they said something really sweet to me, or they said, because now I'm sharing in what made her feel good, and she gets to share in what made me feel good, even though it's not going any further.
I think, Dana, I think what you mentioned is what I'm hearing the three of you saying is, are you coming to the relationship whole, or are you coming to the relationship to get a need met? Because if you're looking for a need to get met, a compliment will matter a whole lot differently, right? So if someone's complimenting me and it's filling a space, I'm going to go to where that space is. But if I'm getting that space filled in a way that's healthy, when someone compliments me, it's just like nice, but it's not needed, right? And how we react is going to be different based on where we're getting our needs met. And are we showing up whole? Or are we showing up with needs and expecting the person, you know, to meet that need?
See, that is profound, right? If you're not getting fed at home, you're going to be hungry. And Dana, you know this, and Lisa, I'm sure you recognize this too, because you've got a good-looking tall man who's now famous because he's got this mouthwash show. But you're a beautiful woman, right? So he has nothing to worry about. But you know, the fact of the matter is when we're living our lives in a public space, I have women that are friends of mine that have come up to me and said, "Oh, your husband." Or not your husband. They'll say, "My husband has a crush on you, a political crush. You know, like you're my husband's political crush." I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but that definitely lets me know that if he's indicated to her in some way that he's attracted to either my intellect or my looks, I need to be aware of that so I can keep that person at a distance.
I want to go back, April, when you said coming to the relationship whole and everything that we have just said. For me personally, after a lot of brokenness, it took me a lot of great counseling to get to that point when John and I met. And there were times when we were dating that I would react in a certain way that he could see still some of that brokenness. And he would say to me, "You know, you don't have to respond that way with me. I'm not him." And so even when I thought I was in a better place, I still had a lot of work to do to let go of all of that. But then I even want to back up further than that, because when you talked about us being a product of our upbringing, basically, my parents are still married. They've never had any issues. We had what we called the perfect family, which now, or we used to say normal, and it's not normal anymore because more families are broken than not. And I think for me, I got married at 19. And so at 19, that's when my experience really started to mold who I was emotionally and mentally. And then the years of brokenness. So a little bit of a backstory for you guys that don't know. The way that April and I met was she is the former executive director of Sheltering Wings, which is a women's domestic violence shelter in Hendricks County. And I am a survivor of domestic violence. And that is how we met. I've been a volunteer with Sheltering Wings for over 20 years. But so that first marriage and that brokenness that abuse. I had to come out of that, but still I had this normal family, normal parents, normal upbringing, and I never really could figure out how I got there. So then I spent the majority of my 20s, 30s, and 40s trying to overcome that. So
that's interesting because I'm listening to that story because I never saw my relationship in my parents. It was a man and a woman.
Yeah.
Very different, right? My parents were married till death did them part. They were married, they got married, you know, they were together over 50 years, right? Until, you know, they passed away. So I had a very stable home, like same phone number until we sold the house, like the whole nine. And but I still, even though I saw stability in the relationship, I never saw my relationship because I knew that I was never going to be in a heteronormative relationship. I was never going to be what society said that I should be because I'm not only am I a lesbian, I am also a masculine of center lesbian. And so all the things that they kept telling me that I needed to be as a woman or a girl or what society said a female is supposed to be, I reject, right? I know that I'm a woman, but you don't get to tell me what kind of woman I get to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so I never saw that. So marriage was, you guys got married young. Marriage was never an idea for me. It was never something that was a reality for me up until I was 45 years old. There was never, because that's when the, you know, Obergefell, right?
Yeah.
So it was never like something that was, or 40, I was 43. It was never something I could consider.
Yeah.
But I have been in long-term relationships. Now, the other problem was I was like Baskin Robbins. When I came out at 19, 20 years old, it was like 31 flavors out here. I need to try every flavor.
Yeah.
That's just who I was. When you spend the first part of your youth not conforming to what society says you were supposed to be, and then when you come out and you are free and you're like, oh my God. And it was just so much. I didn't want to settle down.
Dana, that's how I was at 43 when I got divorced.
Yeah. I mean, there was just so I wasn't mature enough because I didn't date like it as a teenager. Like I didn't date. I wasn't out in high school. So I didn't date. But it's just interesting. Like, even though I had this very stable home, no violence in the home, just very Ozzy and Harriet dipped in chocolate, just boring, right? But stable. But what I took from that was stability.
Yeah.
I know how to make sure that my partner has what they need, right? Not what I think they need, because that's very different, right? Because I had a partner that, you know, in order to get me what I need, she thought all she had to do was buy it. No, that's not how that works. You know, knowing what your partner needs and then being willing to give it, right? Being willing to, if you know your partner, like my partner is very quiet. And she gets migraine headaches when she gets around loud noises, but she's my partner. I need y'all to make that make sense, right?
Yeah. Hey, you're like me. You have a good volume level with your
Oh yeah. But I also can recognize when I look at her when it's too much. So I will turn lights off, I'll turn TV off, I will put my headphones on, I'll do whatever I do to make me happy and to keep her happy at the same time, right? I'm still getting the noises that I want without giving her a migraine. And
I think what you just now said, Dana, is so critical for a healthy relationship. You said, I know what she needs, and I shut the lights out and put my headphones on to get what I need. Because a lot of times we come into the center space and we say, meet my needs. And when they are in a place where they can't, we get desperate or resentful, right? And so we try to get those needs met. And so when you said, I get my own needs met, it's like what we want in a relationship. Sometimes we think it's our partner's responsibility to do. And it's our need. It's in our yard. Our needs, our wants are in our yard. And so if I step in the center saying to my husband, you need to do this for me because I need it and you're my partner and you love me, now it's an expectation. And I have to be able to say, I'm going to meet my own so I can come to the center, needs met, versus come to the center saying, meet my. So when you said, I have to shut this off, put it on to get what I need, that's such a healthy, instead of you getting mad and why isn't she and why you got to have a headache and no, but I want to talk. Okay, so I'm going to put my headphones on and go do my thing, right? And so that's not out of resentment. It's just, hey, I know what I need, so I'm going to take care of that. So
And we
that
had to
was,
learn how to do conflict resolution, which you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
because she's always right in her mind, and I'm always right in my mind. But we
Yeah.
had to learn how to like have the arguments, because people act like, oh, good relationships don't have arguments. Yes, they do.
Mhm.
Every relationship is going to argue. How do you resolve the issue?
Mhm.
How do you deal with it? And are you willing to say my bad?
Right.
Or I'm sorry, or even I'm sorry I made you feel that way. Like
Mhm.
literally we'll say, well, I know this is what you said and it's probably what you meant, but this is how I felt. And like we actively do that. Like again, traits that you learn after screwing up so many times, but you have to be willing to want to do it.
Mhm.
Like, because I've never been to therapy. So my therapy is the school of hard knocks.
It sounds like you have though, Dana.
Oh no, I talk enough. Like I have a theory about therapy. I feel like therapy is a place for people who have a hard time expressing themselves to express themselves freely. I've never had a hard time expressing myself. So now I've had learned the hard way how to express myself, but I get it out.
Yeah.
So I've never gone.
I think I've had lots of clients of people who know how to express themselves. I've had lots of people that can express themselves beautifully, and they're still clients. And so there's so much more
Let's
to
talk
it.
about why people should go to counseling, because now that you mention it, Dana, I've never been to counseling either. My husband hasn't been to counseling. We haven't been to counseling together. We've made it okay, right? But could have been better if we'd had counseling. Would, my yard be decorated differently? If I didn't let anybody encroach. Now that being said, I have 10 kids and 3 grandkids, so it was never my yard.
Mm.
April,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. There's so many reasons. Feel stuck, need to make a decision, need to talk in a space that's a vault. A lot of times people say, I got good friends, I don't need a therapist. Well, a lot of times your friends, you're exchanging stories. We're sitting around talking, everybody's kind of talking. When you're with a therapist, it is all about you. And whatever it is that you need to say gets to stay right there in the vault. Sometimes with friends, it'll come back up later, it'll come back up in wrong spots. All of a sudden it's about them, because friendship is mutual exchange. So there's a difference between a friend and a therapist. It can be something that if anybody that finds themselves overworked, overtired, overstressed, resentful of anything, been through a challenging time in their life, confused, questioning. These are all times that you can go to someone who's trained to say, let me ask you proper questions and make it completely about you. And by the way, when you leave, it gets to stay here. So you never have to hear about it again unless you come back. But I'm going to give you, and then tools. Well, what tools can I do? And then there's the other things that a lot of times we think about: panic attacks, anxiety, depression, not being able to sleep at night, wondering why we have not a great relationship with food, wondering why we go through lots of relationships. I mean, the list for the reasons why you see a therapist it can just be, I just want somebody to talk to that can make it about me. Right. Right. It's like,
Yeah.
I just want to go talk about me and not have to listen for a minute,
And I need to clarify. I need to clarify, because I said something that wasn't quite true. So I said, I've never been to therapy. Nicole, we were talking one day and she said, you should go to therapy. Now I valued her opinion. So I went, but I didn't. So when I say I haven't gone, I went and I was like, I don't need this. So it's very different than I think saying that you went to therapy, then you worked on some things, blah, blah, blah. But I went and I felt like it wasn't. So I wanted to make sure I was truthful, but saying, and once I went to therapy, I was like, I don't need this. So Lucy, I dig it. And I love the reasons why what you gave, because there are people who find themselves in spaces where, an objective and neutral opinion, and helping them make decisions or finding resolution, is a space they need to be in. And I it's for some people.
And the other thing is, what I would say is, when we go get our hair done, we don't like the way someone does it, and we tell them, and they fix it. And the next time And then we go find another somebody to do our hair, right? Or we go to a doctor, we don't like what they have to say, we get a second opinion, right? Or so therapy is the same way. Every therapist has their own sort of style and training. That's the other piece of it. Just because someone is licensed to be a therapist doesn't mean they specialize in all the things. And so finding the right therapist is as important as going, right? And so earlier I said, we're mind, body, spirit. If the mind is troubling you or questioning or causing issue, if the body is causing a lot of autoimmune issues or in undiagnosed pain, chronic pain, acute pain, a lot of that can be traced back. We can work with the body and spirit, emotions. So if you find emotions are getting away from you, or you're not feeling them, feeling numb, feeling too big, whatever it is, any of those can be reasons to go. But when you go, just go. I would say go in. We have lists on our website of questions to ask when you're looking for a therapist, because finding the right one will make all the difference. And when people come and they say, well, I tried it and it didn't work, what I want to say is, you didn't find your person, right? You just didn't find the right. So like, well, I tried dating and dating didn't work. No, you haven't found your person yet, right? Like you haven't found your person. And sometimes
I like that you explain that. And I think there's also a difference between finding the right person and is it even a thing that you need? Like, do you really need a Maserati?
Right.
Or will you be okay with a Ford?
Right.
Right. So I think it's also the bottom line is, how do you get where you're going? I love that you brought that up, because I don't think a lot of people even think of it that way, of maybe it's not your right person. Because I know some people have a therapist that they have multiple therapists to pinpoint and target specific issues that they are dealing with. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
And sometimes, I'll be working with someone and I'll say, I think it might be worthwhile for you to see so-and-so, because that's their specialty and that's where we are in the journey, right? And for me to think I've got to be everything to all the people is not going to help all the people, because I'm not for everybody, right? And there's no therapist. And if you go to a therapist, and I'm going to step on some toes when it comes to therapists, but I am one, so I feel like I can say this. If you go to a therapist and you say, what do you specialize in? And they say, oh, I like to work with everybody, then they don't know. Because nobody likes to work with all ages and stages and issues. What it means is they're willing to, but it doesn't mean that they're good at, and they haven't found their niche yet. So I know the things that I'm like, if that comes across my desk, I'm like, I can, but I'm not going to be the best. It's kind of like, if you have a heart problem, Lisa, you'll appreciate this. If you have a heart problem, you don't want to go to your primary care. You want to go to your cardiologist, right? You got a marriage problem, you don't want to go to a generalist. You want to go to someone that knows about marriages and relationships, and that's what they're trained in, right? It's a difference. And it's the same thing with therapy. So I can't stress that enough. If you're watching and you're like, oh, I've thought about it, or I've gone, it didn't work, find a different person, ask the right questions, keep trying until, ask the question, what do you specialize in? What do you love? Why did you get into this field? Right? And what's your style? What methods have you been trained in? Like, what are you going to do to help me? Right? Are you going to tell me what to do, or are you going to lead me so I can discover it for myself? Right? And some people want led, some people just give me my to-do list, right? And different therapists do things different ways. And so I would encourage listeners to kind of shop around.
April, I do want to say too, it also, yes, finding your person is the best advice for the initial, but then knowing that it's not going to be fixed in one visit. Like, and you have a podcast, Care to Change is your clinic or your counseling center. You have how many therapists do you have on staff?
Somewhere in the 20s. Yeah.
And they have an amazing podcast, but the ones that I listened to last week talk about how to find a counselor, what to expect in that first appointment. And so from my experience, that first appointment was just getting to know about me and my history. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of formulate how they're going to move you through this counseling process. And then I can say now 15 plus years later, when I went for my little checkup on Monday, I mean, it's probably been 3 or 4 years since I've seen my counselor, but every now and then I just kind of feel like I need a gut check, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have this relational thing going on. Am I approaching this the right way? Am I reading the right books? Am I listening to the right podcasts? All that just to make sure I'm on the right track. I was happy to say when I walked out, she was like, "You're doing all the right things." So like, okay, good. But then also too, relationally, obviously tomorrow's Valentine's Day. So we're talking about love relationships mainly, but this can apply to any relationship in our life. It can be immediate family. It can be work. It can be any kind of relationship. So April.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that I'm actually glad that you said that, because as I'm listing all the reasons why people go to counseling, I'm thinking in this in terms of relationship, because we have a lot of parents that come, right? Because how do I help my kid? What am I supposed to do with this teenager, right? Or my mom or my dad are in care, and I'm struggling with what this life transition means, or I've just suddenly lost my spouse or a child or a parent, and I'm in the middle of this grief process, or I lost my job and I'm having a hard time sleeping. So grief and loss and parenting, like it's not, I mean, this is about Valentine's Day and relationships, but counseling and therapy is beyond just relationships. Obviously, we're humans, so we were built for connection. And so everything does come back to relationships, but it can be parents, it can be in-laws. I can't stand my so-and-so in-law, and so I need to go talk to somebody about it because my spouse has one view of them, right? And that's the other thing, like, well, my spouse will tell it to me straight. Yeah. And for me, my spouse has a stake in it, right? So he's going to support me and he's my cheerleader, and he also has a stake in the relationship. So he's not completely objective, right? And so sometimes a neutral person that has nothing to gain or nothing to lose is someone that can walk me through an area of life. So and it doesn't have to just be about marriage. It can be about.
And see, I would also add to that, making sure sometimes you need somebody that has a lived experience similar to yours.
Yes.
So even when I was considering, because, I thought my girlfriend was right, I wanted a Black lesbian to be my, because I don't want to have to explain what it is to be Black to my therapist. I don't want to have to explain what it is to be gay. I want you to already understand that so we can just get past those things, right? And if there's some nitty gritty that we need to get to, I'm not explaining what it is to exist in a white world, blah, blah, blah. I ain't got to do all that. I can just go head on and we can get to the nitty gritty. So I think that is something else that people need to consider, is like find somebody that you feel like may or may not have had some of your lived experiences. So maybe those are some of the questions that you even ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's finding your person. So April, I don't think I've ever told you this. 15 years ago when I found this counselor, you weren't doing this yet, or I would have called you. But it wasn't until I had been seeing her for maybe a few months. And in the session, I brought up going to church and studying the Bible and all that. And it immediately changed the whole relationship, because she did not advertise herself as a faith-based counselor, because she's not, but she happens to personally be a Christian. And come to find out later, we were going to the same church, but it was so big we didn't even know.
No.
So then that changed the sessions and the approach totally, because I gave her permission to open up about that part of her life and to counsel me that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally appreciated that. And the fact that she didn't push it on me in the beginning, it wasn't until I let that be, a part of my experience that she allowed it to be that way too for her. So.
And we're talking about relationships. I mean, and therapy and all those good things are good. But you should actually like the person that you're wanting to be in a relationship. If you, there is such a thing as too much work.
Yeah.
Put into a relationship. If y'all not having, like Nick and I, we live in different cities. So last night was our Valentine's. She's got to sit at a council meeting tomorrow night. So Valentine's Day is done for us. So we had our Valentine's last night. And we just enjoy each other's company so much. We like each other. We, so it's not work to figure out how to, have time with each other. But if it starts to be too much work, so I don't want to be bothered with that.
Yeah. Well, so we're coming up on 10 o'clock. So I want to wrap this up, but I do want to give Tiffany just a little bit of kudos for her TIFF talk, because she spoke to everything that I experienced when I was doing the whole online dating thing. And the honesty thing was the thing that caught my attention the most. I just want to say this. What is it about guys that say they're 6 feet tall and they're not 6 feet tall? Why do guys want to be 6 feet tall so bad? I just don't get it. I don't get it. So Dana, you can't.
I'm not a dude. I'm just dude-like.
I know.
I don't know. And I'm 5'6". So, and my partner is 5'9.5".
Okay. Well,
I like him tall.
Even though the doctors have told me in my physicals the last 2 years that I'm shrinking, I will forever be. So maybe I do get it after all. Yeah. So, and April, I have to explain Tiffany. Her joke is that she's always on the search for Bigfoot. That's her man. And so when she did her TIFF talk and she talked about Bigfoot, that's what that was in reference to.
Okay.
So we are praying that she finds her Bigfoot someday. Okay. So no conspiracy theory tonight, which John normally does at the end of his show. But I do want to start with Dana, then move to Lucy, then move to April for just a quick couple of sentences, wrap up how you feel about Valentine's Day.
I don't. It's a made-up holiday for commercial purposes. I love on my boo 365 days a year. We declared at the very beginning of our relationship, we're not doing that. We love each other every day. So I don't. Valentine's Day don't mean nothing. I mean, it don't mean nothing. I mean, we had it Monday.
All right, Lucy.
I love that, but Valentine's Day in the beginning of our relationship was important, and I think especially since I got married at 19 and I was this, sweet little naive Mormon girl. My husband cured me of that for sure. I had all these expectations wrapped around a certain day, which, as Dana pointed out, is arbitrarily made up. So nowadays, I'm just happy that my 10-year-old, she came and brought me a whole little basket with chocolates and a little bear with sequins and everything. And it was so important to her, and I was so happy to eat the chocolate. But I never want her to feel like she's less than because somebody didn't bring her those chocolates, right? Do not let your identity get wrapped up in things that the government or marketing companies invent.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that. I say both and. Dana, that's right on. When you love your spouse, the other 360, whatever days of the year it is, it's another day. And it's important to know that your worth and value is not based on your relational status. What I will say is it is always good to press pause, to recognize and honor those you love. And if Valentine's gives us an excuse to do that, then I'm all for it. So I'm with Dana. My husband and I celebrate, all the days of the year. And I also love the day because it gives me an excuse to pause and say, hey, let me tell you all the things, because maybe life has gotten fast enough that I haven't done it. Right. So I say both and.
Okay. We'll end on that. I'm not going to add my negative story to that. We want to end on a good note. So, but yes, John and I celebrate every day of the year, even Christmas. We don't do gifts for anything because we figure we can give each other things all year long. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks to producer Johnny for letting us take over the show tonight. And John, I don't know if we have an ending to this or not. So I'm just going to say goodnight.
Yeah!